Thanks. Well, good morning, everyone. How you doing? What an odd question to ask 400 people at the same time. How you doing? My name's Pete. It's going to be one of those days. I'm the executive pastor here, and this morning we're taking kind of between series, so it's kind of just a one-off moment. Over the past few weeks, hopefully you joined us. Pastor Brandon just did a great job breaking down the prodigal son story. He was also accepted into the Screen Actors Guild of America and will be nominated for plenty of awards this award season. But a few weeks before it, before he got into it, if you were with us, it was a great morning. We did this just open Q&A session where we just took your questions, and Brandon and Robert and I were up here. And it was really amazing how many questions came in, because beforehand we actually were having this like little bit of an argument about, are people going to do this? Will we have any questions? And I was like, I'm sure we'll have a few. There were like 70 or something. And obviously we couldn't answer all of them, so we did what we could. And I took all of your questions and just kind of decided that over the next few weeks or how long it would take, I would just try to answer them myself as best as I could on a podcast that I started. It's called Like Stars. You can check it out. Shameless plug. But yeah, you get the app and the website. But one thing I was noticing, and I've worked through a few of them. If you didn't get your question answered, check it out. I might have, and I will try to over the next few weeks and months. I've done like 8 out of 50. But I wanted today to not address one specific question as much as address something that I felt just stood out to me as I was reading through each of them. And if you are someone who is wrestling with how to think about and respond to some of these big hot button issues that are raging in our culture, you are not alone, because there were tons and tons of questions about that. Politically, socially charged subjects, gender, sexuality, abortion, all this kind of stuff. So many questions came in. And we're going to try to work through them. We've already talked about some of those things. We'll continue to talk. We're not afraid to talk about that stuff. We want to talk about it. I've addressed a few of them already on the podcast, and Brandon's talked about stuff. But there's something beneath the surface. There's something at the root of all of these questions and all this tension and all this that we're dealing with. And instead of maybe picking one of those things and talking about it, I just want today to get to the root of it. To the what's beneath all the back and forth, the vitriol, the fighting, the anger, the constant tension and debates about how to think about this issue or that issue. This one consistent underlying theme that is buried beneath all of them. And as a follower of Jesus, I think it's a theme that we need to be so tuned into and aware of and understand. To really have it grounded, to really be like, okay, this is where I'm coming from, and this is why I'm coming. Because as these debates continue to rage, one thing that we're seeing, and I'm not trying to paint one side as the devil, whatever, human beings do this, but these debates are getting more and more emotional and personal. And instead of just having discussions about ideas, we're really starting to have more discussions about who is bad and who is a good person, and shame and social pressure. And more, there's this fear of, and you don't have to answer this question, but I'm sure some of you have felt this. There's like this fear of being on the wrong side. And it's even a phrase that's getting thrown around. Well, you're going to be on the wrong side of history, right? It's like, I don't want to be on the wrong side. And there are many people, probably many of you sitting in this room, who at your core, you want to follow Jesus. You're like, I believe in him. I want to follow him. But more and more, you're struggling to exist in a culture that keeps on categorizing people who follow his teachings as bad, hateful, cruel, bigots, all these kind of words, and intolerant, pick your villainous buzzword. And I get it. I understand why this is happening. I get it. But to really address it properly, I think there's this moment we need to move past the emotion a little bit and get to the root of it. And this is hard because nobody wants to be the bad guy. Nobody wants to feel like you're on the bad side. I don't. I was talking to the mom's ministry this week, and I was like, I have a job where the title of my job makes people assume that I'm a hateful bigot before I even open my mouth. And I'm like, let me talk first, then, but like, it's I don't want that. I don't like it. I'm uncomfortable with it. But before we go running headfirst into each and every camp that's claiming to be the good side versus the bad side, the good people, villainizing, disagreeing, there's just this one important issue that needs to be settled. That we need to be like, this is where we're coming from. Agree or disagree, this is where we're coming from. And it's a question that is at the root of all of these debates, all of these discussions, all the fighting, all the wars. There's a question at the root of it. And it's this: what is good? What is good? Everything we're talking about, everything we're debating about is centered around that basic question, what is good? It's at the root of everything we're struggling with. We talk as if the real issues are, love and tolerance. Look, real quick, those aren't the root issues. Those are just ways that we go about dealing with and talking about what is good. When you say what is loving, well, to love is to want the good of other people, right? To love somebody is to want good for their life. How can I say what is or isn't loving if I haven't first decided what is good? And tolerance, which is just such a crazy buzzword today. I mean, to be intolerant is to not want to allow something, which every human being that I know is intolerant of things that they don't think are good. We aren't tolerant of murder or rape or smoking in public. We're not even tolerant of people that we think are intolerant in this crazy twist of irony, right? Like the loudest voices for intolerance are being intolerant of something that they think is bad. Because they think, well, the way that you think, the way you're approaching this is bad, and I don't want that, so I'm not going to allow it. So tolerance and intolerance, love, they're smoke screens for the bigger issue. What's underneath the arguments? The fighting, the back and forth, the rage and the warfare, the social media explosions, and the fear that so many followers of Jesus have about being on the wrong side is ultimately a matter of what is good. What is good? We're at each other's throats, both proverbially and sometimes literally, unfortunately, because we don't agree on what is good. And it's been raging for as long as there have been people to actually argue about this issue. We all want to bring about the best. Everyone that I know, I've never met somebody that didn't ultimately want what is good. We want to be healthy, we want to be happy, we want lives that are successful and work. But the problem is we don't and never have agree on what that is. How does it, what brings it about? What is good? What is good for us? What is not good for us? Everything else is just arguments that are piling on top of that one basic idea. And so I thought this morning it might be valuable to step back from some of the big hot button issues and just talk about that idea from a Christian perspective. So if you're sitting here this morning, you're like, well, I'm not even a Christian, just know that I'm biased. I'm coming from a Christian perspective. I'm explaining to you this morning as a Christian the idea of goodness from a Christian's perspective. Does that make sense? So if it's okay, I'm just going to pray. This is a kind of a heavy topic, but I just want to pray and ask God to speak this morning more than me, and ask that his Spirit would open our hearts and minds and ears to what he might want to say to us as we navigate a really difficult issue. Would you just pray with me? God, we invite you this morning, as we sang earlier, Holy Spirit, come rest on us. You, God, come and be near us. I know you're already here, God, but in ways that we feel and we hear your voice and we sense you, we're being led by you. We want to be led by you, God. We want to be people who know your voice, who hear you. And so we invite you this morning to speak. We invite you to open our eyes, open our ears, open our hearts to your truth in ways that bring about real life change, in ways that bring about hope, and in ways that bring about faithful commitment to you in all things. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. All right, so in the book of Psalms, King David has this really great statement, and I'm not going to get into the whole psalm. It's just the first statement I want to get into. He says this: many, Lord, are asking, who will bring us prosperity? And that was written, 2,800 years ago, and you could say that today, couldn't you? You could put that on Instagram right now and be like, yep. Many are asking, who will bring us prosperity? Success, the best of life. We want to make life count. Who will bring it about in our lives? But what I want to focus on in that little sentence there is this word that we translate as prosperity is a small, tiny little Hebrew word that's all over the Bible. It's all over the Bible, and it's the word tov. Say tov with me. Tov. You can also, depending on how you pronounce Hebrew, it can be a B, tov. And tov is all over. It's all over the Old Testament. One of the reasons why it's hard, though, is because tov can be translated lots of different ways. The word tov, depending on the context or how it's being used, sometimes tov can mean to flourish. Like there's a mention of tov cities that are growing and being healthy. To succeed, a person who did well at business, their business was tov. It could mean something beautiful. You could refer to your wife as tov. You could refer to your cow as tov, but please keep those two separate. Something being pleasant, something being to your benefit. Like you should do that. It's tov for you. There's even a verse in Deuteronomy that speaks of God's heavenly storehouses of tov, and we translate it as treasures. Like tov is like all these myriad of different ways of using it. Tov would be used when you're making a decision. Like we want to know, what should we do here in this moment? Okay, we're faced with an option. What should we do? Sometimes they would say, well, do what is tov. Do what seems tov to you. Seems like it's going to be best. There's this verse where the Israelites are wandering the desert and they're whining and they're complaining. And they said, hold on, wouldn't it have been tov for us to just go back to Egypt? Like better. Wouldn't the tov thing, the thing that is good for us to be, go back? And much later, King Solomon is praying for his people. He says, God, please help me teach the people to live the tov way. The tov way to live. And if you just think about that sentence, teach them the tov way to live. They translate it as the right way. Like there's a way to live which brings about prosperity, success, goodness. Help us find that, God. Is it over here? Is it back in Egypt? Is it over here? We want to find what is tov. Mostly, though, the most common translation of the word tov is simply our English word good. Tov is good. But think about all the ways behind it, right? It's more than just like, oh, it's good. It's beautiful. It's happy. It's joy. It's blessing. It's the life that we're looking for. Then Hebrew had another word that was the exact opposite. It was yin and yang, night and day. And the other word is the Hebrew word ra. Say ra. Ra. Ra is literally the opposite of whatever tov is. So it could speak of failure. It could speak of disaster, destruction, sometimes even death. Ra was the wrong decision. Like avoid the ra. Don't do what is ra. Stay away from it. If you could say something was ugly or flawed, like, oh, that cattle looks like they're dying. It's ra. There's something wrong here. It represented something that was difficult or hard or painful. Sometimes ra is translated as misery or misfortune. Ra could even be translated as sadness. Like, why do you look so raw? What's going on? You look terrible. Again, don't say that to your wife. There's a moment in the book of Job, if you're familiar with Job, the story where this guy's life just goes to, horrible, horrible, horrible. There's a moment where Job says, I wanted tov, but all I've found is ra. Like, my life is not what I want it to be. It's horrible. But the most common translation of ra is simply bad or evil, which is kind of confusing. And I want to be honest about this. The English word evil has a very different idea than the English word bad, doesn't it? Like if somebody calls something bad, it's like, okay, whatever. But if they call it evil, it's like, ooh, evil. And we got to kind of work through this because words have a way of, you hear a word, you form a picture in your head. Ra can mean evil in the sense that we talk about it, but it literally just means bad. So think of it this way. When you hear good and bad, it sounds a little different than good and evil. Good and evil, suddenly you feel like you're talking about like Superman and Lex Luthor. Superman's good, Lex Luthor's evil. Or Mother Teresa is good and Hitler is evil. And yes, the Bible would agree that Hitler is definitely wrong. Like it's evil. But it can cause us to miss the really ultimate meaning of these words, the bigger picture they paint for us. Because what happens is we take these words and we make them all about like being moral or ethical, like being a good person or being an evil person. And when we apply these words to our public discourse, to our political arguments, like, oh, that's bad and that's good, it can get very personal. It can get very like, oh, you're calling me a bad person and you're good, I want to be a good person. You're a bad person. All this kind of, and evil. I don't want to be evil. But ultimately, that's not quite how these words are being used. And if a Christian tells someone something isn't good, are we saying that you're not a good person? Are we saying that you're evil? Or are we trying to say something different? And also, the other thing is that even as Christians, defining good, tov, and ra this way kind of can make us feel like all the Bible cares about is that we're like good little people, like just behave, be a good boy. But these words are so much bigger than that. In fact, the first time that you see the word tov appear in the Bible, and ra, is actually in the beginning, literally the beginning, in the book of Genesis. Genesis paints this beautiful picture in chapter 1 of God, this brilliant craftsman creator forming every piece of the universe. And he does it in the sort of the poetic way that Genesis 1 describes it. There's sort of these stages, these steps that he takes where he forms like light and dark and then the sun and the moon, all these different kind of things. And as he does, as he forms land and fills it with vegetation and then birds and animals and then the pinnacle of his work, breathing life into humanity, each step along the way, Genesis tells us that he finishes one step and he steps back. And he kind of pauses and examines it. And like a master craftsman, making sure every piece is perfectly aligned before moving on to the next step. At every point, he ends his inspection by saying, it's tov, it's good. And then at the very end, he looks at the whole thing and he says, he looked at all of his creation and it was very tov, Genesis 31. It is very tov. It's very good. Now, I want you to see this because this is the first time tov is used. There's nothing happening here that I would call moral or ethical, right? We're talking about behavior here. I mean, how odd would it be if God was sort of calling an ocean, what a good little ocean. Oh, look at you behaving so well. That's a virtuous mountain. You would never say that. You would never describe a field of flowers, much less a blade of grass, as evil. Unless we're talking about like kale, that's an evil plant. But normally you would never actually describe something as evil. What's happening here, the picture that it's painting us is of an artist who set out to create something, or an inventor who wants to design something, and having completed it and finished it, it's like you push the play button and everything just works. It's like, aha, tov, success, it works. Everything is aligned. The architect pulls it out and looks at the building and it perfectly matches the blueprints. Like, yep, you got it, tov. Good job. Or maybe like when again, I've used car analogies in the past because I'm an idiot with cars, but you're sitting in your car and that annoying light starts blinking in your dashboard that says something's wrong, and it's just mocking your manhood because you're an idiot about cars and you don't know what to do with it. So you take it to the mechanic and you're like, Dave, fix it, please. And after I do, I always have that moment where I drop my car off and then I just sort of wait for the phone call. Like, oh, is this gonna ruin my life? How much is this gonna cost me? And sometimes you get the phone call and the answer comes back like, hey, it was a small thing, got it. Everything is good. You're like, oh. Or sometimes you get that really horrible one, like, hey, there's a problem. You ran out of blinker fluid and your engine's bad and the whole thing needs to be replaced. You're like, no! I'm an idiot, I'm sorry. But think about how those words are used, good and bad. Your mechanic wasn't calling to tell you that, hey, all the little cogs in your machine, in your engine, they're all such good little cogs. They're behaving perfectly well. Give them a treat. No, he was just saying it's working. Everything as it should be. And vice versa, if he says, hey, the engine's bad, he's not implying that your car has gone full Skynet aware and is about to try to destroy humanity, so come pick it up, please. It's evil. No, he's saying something's wrong. There's a problem. Something needs to be fixed. It's out of alignment. Because your car was created, right? Somebody made it. And the people that made it had an intention for it, and that intention was to be able to drive and get you places. And when it's driving and getting you places the way it was created for, it's tov, it's good, it works. But when something's wrong with it, and it's like smoke's coming out the back, it's raw, it's not working. and you're not enjoying the ride that it was created to offer you any longer, and something needs to be fixed. That is how the Bible consistently uses tov and ra. When it calls things beautiful, when it calls things healthy, when it calls things flourishing, when it says it is good, it's saying we believe that a good creator, a wise God, created all of this for our benefit because he loves us, and it's working. It's just as it should be. It's tov. Vice versa. This isn't what it's supposed to be. Something's wrong here. Why are we behaving this way? Why is it, this isn't in line. There's something wrong with the engine. It's raw. And these two ideas are constantly contrasted with each other throughout the Old Testament and into the New Testament, where there's this picture of the world as God created, as God intended, as life in God intended for you to live. And there's one that is tov, because a tov God made it. And then there's one that is ra. We see this first big comparison in the Book of Deuteronomy when God first calls the Jewish people and invites them into this agreement with him. He says, I put before you today an offer. He literally says, I set before you an offer. You can have life and tov, prosperity, or death and ra, destruction. Now, keep that up for a second. Just like God wasn't saying, here's the deal, guys. Right now, you can either choose to keep living or I'm going to kill all of you. That's not what he was saying. He was telling them, you're at a crossroads and you've got a fork in the road. I'm putting before you a fork in the road. You can either go this way and experience the life I made you for and tov, the goodness of it, or you can go this way, and I'm promising you it's not going to lead where you want to go. That way is ra, that way is tov. That way is the life that I made, that way is apart from the life that I made, and it's nothing but death and destruction. So choose. Pick. Free will, go. What do you want? No wonder they use this word so often. Quite a few years later, a young king named Solomon took the throne after his father, David. And Solomon, I could just imagine being a young man and being made king. Like, what do I do? How do I lead these people? How stressful that would be. And there's this great moment where he prays to God. And this is his prayer. He says, God, here's what I want from you. Give me a discerning heart. And to discern means to know the difference between. I want the knowledge or the awareness to distinguish between tov and ra. God, that's what I need. A young king prayed that. He said, God, what I want is for you to tell me what's good for my people and what's bad for my people. Because I don't know how to do this. So you help me. Give me that knowledge. Give me the awareness of what you have created tov and what you have said is ra, so that when I make decisions and when I lead the people, I will lead them to tov and not to ra. And if you're familiar with the story, God said, that's a good prayer. I'm going to answer that. And not only did they answer it, but they would eventually call Solomon the wisest man who ever lived. People would travel from miles around to come and hear Solomon's wisdom, because wisdom in the ancient world was discerning the knowledge of tov and ra. Knowing what's good for you and what's bad for you is the secret to success, prosperity, tov and ra. And when David said we all want prosperity, we all want this, right? We're all looking for this. And we still do, but once again, we find ourselves facing the same problem. And here is the root of it all. We want tov, we want to avoid ra, but which is which? How do we know what is good? Who decides? Who tells us? How do we know if this is going to be good or this is going to be bad? Well, welcome to the Garden of Eden. God finishes his creation. He places the human beings in this wonderful paradise, which for them is, in ancient culture, looked agricultural. Who knows what paradise looked today? Maybe like, here's the beach of Hawaii, whatever. Like this place that is tov, it's good, their lives are good. Everything about their lives, like, this is really cool. This is God's like, enjoy it, it's great. Here, have fun. And then he says, I want to give you one rule, okay? Just one rule. I want you to take care of everything. I want you to manage it for me. Enjoy it. It's tov, you're tov, it's all good. Here's the one rule I want to give you. In the middle of this garden, there are these two trees, and one is the tree of life, and the other one is called the tree of the knowledge of Tov and Ra. Literally the same Hebrew words as Solomon's prayer. God, give me the knowledge of Tov and Ra. The knowledge of good and bad, good and evil. And God says, here's the deal. Keep eating from the tree of life. Feast on it. Find life. Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of Tov and Ra. Why? Why? What's going on here? And that was his only rule. Enjoy life. Just don't eat from the tree of good and evil. And we're all familiar with what happens next, right? The snake shows up. And a snake, I said this before, was actually a symbol of wisdom in the ancient world, kind of like an owl is today. And the serpent shows up and tempts these humans to go eat from that tree. Now, it's important to notice that when the serpent comes, he doesn't get them to reject the existence of God. There's no God, you're stupid. It's not that. It's more subtle. The serpent says, hold on, so wait a second. God said to you that if you ate from that tree, you'd die? You won't die. No. Instead, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing Tov and Ra. So in this moment, God gives them this one rule. And he says, do whatever you want, except one thing. Let me tell you what is good. That's the rule. The one rule I have for you is let me decide what works and what doesn't work. Why? Because I created you and I know. That's it. As long as you let me tell you what is good, this will remain paradise. Life will be Tov when you let me tell you what Tov is. Trust that I know every inch of your inmost beings. Trust that I know how atoms work together and how agriculture works and how the stars align. Trust that I know everything about you. And if I tell you something is good, it is good. And if I tell you something's raw, I'm saying it's raw because I love you and I'm your father and I don't want you to screw your life up. Trust me, that's the only rule. And if you break that rule, if you go and find raw, go and just find yourself, you are gonna find death and destruction. Seeking Tov apart from God always leads to Ra. When you and I seek and try to decide for ourselves what is good, it only ever leads to what is bad. Because at the end of the day, we don't know. But here's the serpent. Oh, don't listen to him. He's lying to you. Actually, if you go and take that, you will be just like God yourself. You can be your own gods. Your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing Tov and Ra. And when the serpent says that to them, he's not saying you're going to be like Bruce Almighty and all of a sudden you can snap your fingers and all miracles. That's not the idea of like God. He's saying you don't need to consult some higher power. Just do what you want. Do what feels good. Be your own God. You don't need it. God is just trying to control you. God is holding out. He's holding that truth from you just so he can keep you under his thumb. You don't need him. Do it yourself. Get rid of God. Decide for yourself. Find your own success. Take life by the reins. Decide for yourself. Be your own God. Yes, it turns out that Oprah was not the first person to tell us to live our own truth. It's been happening for thousands of years. And for thousands of years, it has been a lie that has led people away from Tov and straight into Ra. And this is actually where we introduce the word sin. And we've talked about this before. I think we mentioned it even a couple weeks ago in the Q&A, that sin means to be off. It means to miss. It could be used in archery or throwing javelins, like aiming at a bullseye and missing it. God says, I have created something good. I call it Tov. It's blessed. It's happy, successful, prosperous. Here it is. Aim at that. Trust me. Go this way. And we're like, no, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going this way. Why? And this other voice is telling us, oh man, don't be your own person. Don't let God tell you what to do. Pick your own target. Shoot at whatever you want to. Shoot at the target that you think will make you happy, what feels good to you. Live your truth. And so we just start shooting arrows, and they're just flying everywhere. And then we're confused why there are hurt and bleeding people everywhere around us, and our lives aren't where we want them to be, because we've been shooting arrows at the wrong things. That is sin. We define good ourselves, and we miss the mark of what is actually good, of what we're made for, of what we're created for. And the Bible is so clear on this. And I said I'm coming from a Christian perspective, that the consequences have been severe. A great deal more raw has come out of us trying to do this. We have broken the world because, surprise, the serpent was a liar. He did not want what was good for us and still doesn't, but we keep listening. Like a small child ignoring our mother that's saying, do not touch that hot stove. You don't tell me how to live. Our hands are blistering and bleeding and we don't know why. Work is toil, marriage is a struggle, relationships broken. We've lost paradise. And we're like, what? God, why did you do this? God, what? No, you've been shooting the wrong thing. You want tov. He told you where it was. But we just keep right on. And here's what's so difficult is because, again, we all know that good, we all feel and sense that good is out there. It's like ingrained in us. There is good to be had. We all want prosperity. We just want to find it. And it's like things are a mess. And our response is to say, well, let's just keep trying to do something else that seems right to us. And then the next thing we do will be better. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, let's try something. Let's try, this seems good for us. How about that? This seems good. We keep assuming that one of these days we're going to figure it out. And then we'll have paradise back. We just need to find that thing that'll be good for us. Let's try this one. No wonder we fight so strongly and harshly. We have this, all of us share this innate sense that there is goodness out there. There is a life that's worth living. There's a society that is healthy and whole. So we yell and we scream and we use social media like a blunt weapon to beat the tar out of each other because we can't agree on where good comes from, on what good actually is. But we keep trying. Well, maybe this will do it. Well, maybe we just need to figure out how to live this truth of ourselves. Or maybe if we act this way, this will make us happy. But look at what the Bible tells us, that, and this is I could unpack this a lot on time, but the Bible tells us that you and I are never going to get there. It's very pessimistic about your and I's ability to get to the good on our own. And here's why. It says in the book of Romans, Paul says this in chapter 1, verse 28. He says, furthermore, just as they, humans, did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God. And there's that word knowledge. Because you and I said, we don't need God telling us what's tov and ra. We do it for ourselves. Let's be our own people. Here is the response. So God gave them over to a depraved mind that they do what ought not to be done. And this word depraved is pretty heavy. I don't like depraved. The word depraved means counterfeit or corrupted, impure. There's something wrong with it. Essentially, God said, I gave you a choice, tov and ra, choose. You chose that way, and guess what? Now you're living in ra. And it's not just that you're living in ra, he's saying your thinking has become corrupted. Because you walked away from the one who showed you what was true and what was good, and you tried to find it yourself. And now humanity's brains aren't functioning properly. We're searching for the good inside of ourselves and in this creation around us, when the whole time the one who created it is saying, let me tell you what it is. And because we keep searching for it in ourselves, we keep looking for life in lifeless things rather than the one that gives life, we're confused why things are broken and ruined. Our thinking has become corrupted. And because our thinking is corrupted as a society, as a people, we're never going to reason our way to the good. We're going to keep making it worse and worse. And we're going to have these huge arguments, and we're going to yell at each other and say, we think humans should be this way. And people say, I don't think you should. You're a hateful bigot. Don't listen to that. Why are we doing this? Because we're trying to find good, and it's all we know. Because there's a virus that's infected our thinking. And our fighting is just futile at this point. We continually fail to experience the life that God actually created because we just keep on eating forbidden fruit over and over and over. We keep on saying, I don't need God to tell me. I'm going to figure it. I'm going to live my truth. Do what makes me feel good. Do what makes me happy in the moment. And then we're surprised and angry the world isn't the way it should be. But it's never going to be. It is the pinnacle of ignorance to think that we, mere creations, know better than our Creator. So who will we listen to? Who will we turn to when we have these big hot button social issues and we're all fighting and warring and drawing up sides and aiming our guns at each other? Who is deciding what is good? That's the root of it. Before we get into the details of this issue, who is deciding what is good for you? Will good be based on what feels good in the moment, on general opinions, on the zeitgeist of the current culture? That has not worked out so well. I mean, think about how many times cultures have been horrible and done horrible things. And everyone that lived in the culture, like, well, this seems good to us. Yeah, sure, let's have slaves. Yeah, sure, let's kill Jews, whatever. Like, you can't just simply base goodness on how the population generally currently is voting. That has never worked out good for us. It can't just be based on what feels good, because if what feels good to me is horrible for you, what do? We can't just be based on what makes me happy in the moment. We're not four. We've grown up enough to know that your temporary, momentary happiness is not a good indicator of what is ultimately good for you. Right? Haven't we? Hopefully. Or will we base it on what our Creator says? The one who formed us, who made us, who knit us in our mother's wombs and knows our inmost being and says, I love you and I know what is tov. Follow me. And here's why I'm a Christian, guys. I want you to, maybe that might be a heavy statement, but like, if there's a verse in the Bible that captivates me more than any other, a statement that just draws me and moves me and causes me to say, I am in, it's this. God, the loving Creator, became one of us, took on human flesh in order to reveal himself to us and lead us into goodness, in order to free us from the slavery to Ra that we're stuck in and help us find the life he made for. And he says this in the book of John. He says this, the thief, the serpent, the lying snake only ever came to steal, kill, and destroy. He only ever wanted Ra for your life, but I have come that you may have life to the fullest. I have come to give you tov because I love you. I care about you. So follow me and find life. Follow me and I will show you what is good. Trust me and obey me regardless of what culture is telling you. When the world around you is trying to shame you and put you down and call you stupid and call you an evil bigot, ignore it and trust that I love you and I know what's best for you. And that is the Christian perspective to hot button issues today. And it's hard, and I'm not saying it to make it feel easy. It's hard. We all feel the pressure. But to live by faith in Jesus is to say, you're in charge, you came to rule, and so I'm gonna do what you say. And the reason I'm gonna do what you say is because you're God and you know better than me. And I don't care if social media calls me horrible names. I don't care if they pick it outside my church. I don't want people to. I hope they don't. But I'm still gonna trust that the wisdom of Jesus is greater than the wisdom of human beings. And that is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. It doesn't just mean you said a prayer and you go to heaven one day. It means that he is running the show in your life. As the great theologian Carrie Underwood said, Jesus, take the wheel. Tell me what is good and I'll follow you there. Tell me what's good for my family and we're going your direction. Tell me what's good for this community and those are the decisions that we're gonna make because you know more than we do and we're sick of screwing this world up by trying to do it ourselves. What is Tov and Ra? It is what God created us to live and experience. We find Tov when we look to the Creator and say, what did you intend here? I'm following you. I'm trusting you. And yes, there will still be Ra in your life even when you do that because we're still in a broken world. But man, it's better. And I would just end by saying this. I believe that when a group of people, an individual, a family, but even more so a group of people, commit themselves to the ways of Jesus. And day in and day out, they say, Jesus, let your wisdom guide my decision making. You tell me what is good, and we actually do it. I believe that we don't need to yell at the world around us. We don't need to fight and claw. I think the world will actually see something tov and want it. But the problem is, oftentimes Christians have beliefs about things, but they don't actually show tov with their lives. So of course the world doesn't think we have anything good to offer. We've made our faith all about getting out of here and going somewhere else. And so when we say this is what's good, they're like, we don't care what you have to say. What if they looked at us and saw healthy marriages, strong kids, healthy confidence, people that were succeeding in life and finding goodness and contentment and joy, and they said, well, whatever you've got, I want it. That looks tov to me. It would change the arguments a lot. So less screaming, more obeying Jesus might be the answer. Would you stand with me? As we head out today, we always end with this little statement that we would be a people who wake up, rise, and shine. That we would wake up to the source of tov, God, our creator, in the form of a human being, Jesus the King, who says, I am what is good, follow me. And that we would rise to life by actually doing it, putting our faith in him, trusting him, and saying, tell me how to lead, and I will find tov. I will find life to the fullest. And that we would become a collection of people who don't just talk about good things, but we would shine good things as an outflow of our obedience, and we would shine to the world around us. Amen? Have a great Sunday, guys. We'll see you next week.